anyway, here I am.
Welcome, everyone. Thank you for your input this morning. And if we could move on, we wanted to talk a little bit more about the infant and early childhood mental health consultation. We have two guests today, Julie Myrie from MDH, and I know Julie, we've worked together for a while now, being involved with local public health, and then Taya. And maybe you guys maybe you could introduce yourself and tell us what you do. Maybe we could start there and then move into our content.
Kath, can we just add kind of a little bit of like context for this? So,
Sure.
So just way last spring when COVID and all of the quarantining and everything about the work that we do had to change. We the coalition put out a survey saying kind of what are some of the issues that you're experiencing and where can we help support you more. And so that being a part of that, framing this up for figuring out ways to provide more support and consultation for those organizations that may not have that in their at their ready or didn't ask for funding for it in their grant making, or their grant requests. So part of this is kind of like with COVID going on and people still feeling like they need support, and that, as we all know, reflective consultation is always a benefit for all of us. And so just kind of trying to figure out how can we use some of the funds that are available to help support staff and supervisors in managing through all of this. So that's kind of the gist of where this came from. And so I just kind of thought it would be helpful to put that into context a little bit before. So all that being said, please, if you guys would go ahead and introduce yourselves, that would be great.
Yeah, why don't you go first and then I can introduce since I'm presenting first.
Since you're presenting first, yeah. My name is Taya Dale. I work for the Department of Human Services in the behavioral and I am working specifically in the infant and early childhood program and manage our mental health consultation. I'll talk a little bit more about what we currently do and what we hope to do as well. I do this job for 10-hour shifts a week, and then on the final day, I engage in mental health consultation through contracts that are associated with the grants that we have. So I'm familiar with home visiting, enjoy reflection too with many groups, and just look forward to talking to you this potential service.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm Julie Myrie, and I work at the Minnesota Department of Health. I have had most of my experience has been in local public health in Northeast Minnesota, and I am a public health nurse, and so I've been doing visiting and just different levels of administration for several decades. And now I'm at MDH, and I'm a family home visiting nurse consultant for a couple regions, the Northeast and the Central region. And I'm just kind of reacclimating back into family home visiting since I was reassigned to COVID response as part of MDH response. So just am thrilled to be back and doing more work in family home visiting. So it's been great to be able to join you today. So then do you want me just to start the presentation?
I will share my
Okay.
screen, and so you can get started. Yep.
Perfect. And let me know, I come from rural. I'll blame that on rural. My bandwidth sometimes is my worst enemy here. So let me know if I freeze. Let me just make sure. Okay, great. So we're here to talk about, thank you, Molly, for framing the needs that you had seen. We're seeing those needs as well. So we're here to talk about what we can do together to kind of move to help address some of those needs. And we have an opportunity, and we'll have opportunities in the future to work together. If you want the next slide. So as Molly said, definitely you have seen those needs. we have as well at MDH. We know this year has been incredibly difficult for families, for all of us. There's been so many environmental stresses. There's been the racial injustices. There's been the pandemic, all that increased stress. Where there were stress before, there's even more stress based on what's been happening. So we know that nonprofits, home visiting agencies hadn't included funding for reflective practice. And those that did include it am I getting a lot of feedback? Okay, those that did include it had difficulty finding culturally appropriate consultation. So, and we also heard from you, the coalition, on your concerns related to the increased needs. So next slide. So we have some funding that is available, and there is a scope for the use of those funds, and they're federal and state home visiting funds, and they are specifically identified to support. What's in scope is the implementation of home visiting, of which consultation is a part of that, training, evaluation, and capacity building. What's not included in the scope, or what's a limit of the scope of funding, is paying for direct mental health services. So we are not allowed to pay for direct mental health services, even though we know there's huge needs in that area. Okay, next slide. Okay, was it, okay, I have a different, was that the next slide? Okay. Okay, sounds good. Do I have a different one? I have a different set, so go ahead, it's okay. So then phase one, trying to look at that we were brainstorming how could we use potentially some unused funding, that because, for instance, I was reassigned for a lot of my time. We had a lot of our family home visiting staff reassigned for COVID response. So we had some funding ability, and we know that there was some initial work that was done. Some nonprofits did through our innovation funding. They were funded to do some work around training, and yet we know that we weren't able to get funding out very quickly because of our low staffing ability at MDH and the time that it takes. It would be impossible to develop multiple grants or amendments, just wouldn't be feasible. So we brainstormed an opportunity with MDH and DHS, work together to brainstorm, could we use this as an opportunity to utilize the network that's already been built through DHS, for DHS consultants to provide training and consultation in these next 3 months. They already have a system in place. And we already, MDH has a network of home visitors. How can we work together? Okay, next slide. Oh, okay. So I had a different order. So we did provide some additional funding to individual agencies through the innovation grant. So there were some that really looked at training, and that was a great start. Some cultural training. And again, this was an opportunity to increase access, working with DHS's already established network, and to pilot to see how this could work. Okay, next slide. So you might ask, there's an aggressive timeline here, and why are we rushing this? We're looking at March through June, and it really comes down to funding. The funding is available and needs to be expended in the next 3 or 4 months. So it's really being, this first phase is being driven by funding. We have the funding available now. With phase 2, which looks at the next year, and then phase 3 going forward, we have an opportunity to really be thoughtful and plan and be working together on how that could look to meet the needs. We have an opportunity to, all the grants will be ending in December of 2022, And so we have an opportunity to identify what or plan on what we would want the RFP to look like from 2023 to 2028. So that will be an opportunity. So this is really doing an initial phase 1 pilot. Okay, next slide, please. And so I just want to make sure people know that we don't have a preconceived idea of what phase 2 and phase 3 should look like. There really aren't any plans other than we want to keep moving forward, and we want to address the mental health needs that are not met. We want to really use the information that we gain through the phase 1, this pilot phase, in the next 3 to 4 months to inform what the next steps could look like. We want to do it in discussions with you, and we want to really be thoughtful and want your feedback at every step of the way. So just want to make sure that, this is phase 1, and phase 2 and 3 really is also an opportunity to think about how that should look. And then phase 3 will be conducted through and in conjunction with our RFP that will occur in early 2022. So still coming pretty quickly, right? It's surprising how fast things move, time moves. So right now, we are going to be looking for you. We want you to provide input. Are there specific topics that would be good to do some larger webinar trainings on? What are your needs? What are your questions or concerns about phase 1? We'd like to hear that. What information would be helpful for us to know? And how would agencies like to be contacted or involved in this opportunity? Those are some key questions that we would like some input on from all of you as we move pretty quickly into this phase 1 or this pilot phase. And I should say, I am stepping in for Dawn, who is at a hearing. I should have said that to begin with. And she'll be probably joining, and I will do as best I can to answer questions. And I may defer to Dawn on a few things since I just came back from the COVID response. But I just really appreciate being able to share with you today on her behalf. Thanks.
And do you think after I talk for a little bit, we can go back to those questions and then we can have a discussion about those? That would be wonderful.
That'd be great.
Thank you, Julie. Before I start too, I was just wondering, and I can only see a small number of people, so I'll go through quickly. Can you do the raise hand or raise your hand physically if your agency already has mental health consultation or reflective consultation? Or maybe I should see if you don't, then raise your hand. Okay. Thank you. We'll start with the presentation. So many of you know what reflective or mental health consultation is. So I'll just briefly, talk about that, and then we'll talk about or think together about the possibilities. So it really builds the capacity of the home visitor, and they're recognizing, interpreting, support social and emotional needs of the families in creating environments that promote healthy development. So we know that. And so the consultation just is supporting of the home visitor in doing these things. You can move to the next slide. So mental health consultation uses a combination of training and common topics that people ask about our child development, working with families and trauma. There are topics that we can think about. And when we do training, some of the trainings may feel more formal if the agency asks for, or these topics might be woven into the more reflective consultation that they're engaging in a longer period of time. So we provide reflective consultation, which includes active listening, exploration about the home visitor's attitudes about a situation. And then there's sometimes a small amount of, thinking about next steps or organizing. Maybe some supporting of, capacity or skill building. Again, in a non-directive way, in an exploratory way, supporting the home visitors so that they're developing their own next steps. And I want to say that this is all while using a lens that promotes diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. So I'll talk a little bit more about the training of our consultants. So there are so many great outcomes that we know of. I'm sure that you guys have all accessed this research. You know, those who receive consultation or reflective consultation show increased knowledge about child development and family behavioral health, increased capacity to understand and support around a child's development. We find decreased job-related, increased satisfaction, that increase of sense of feeling supported, increase of a feeling of efficacy. And I know a project in Minnesota specifically, you know, the McBee grant and Jill Hennis, a lot of work, I'm sure many of you were involved with that, around researching reflective consultation and the importance associated with home visiting. So we have Minnesota, you know, to credit to a lot of this. So you may move forward. So the qualifications of our mental health consultants are the consultants too who are providing consultation to many of you who already receive reflective supervision. They're all licensed mental health professionals under contract with the Behavioral Health Division. So many of these individuals might also be the same individuals who are providing you mental consultation or reflective consultation if you already receive that. They hold expertise and skills in early development, early childhood mental health, relationship building, motivational interviewing. And we, all of them are trained in DC 0 to 5, have extensive clinical experience treating young children and families. Many are trained in things like child-parent psychotherapy, some attachment and biobehavioral catch-up. And if already endorsed at a level 3 or 4, they're in the process of doing that and supported by our grant. So our consultants receive many hours of training prior to engaging in consultation in our system. And then every year we hold a week-long training where we're to support our consultants. We focus on diversity-informed tenants. We have usually another expert on reflective consultation supervision come in and speak. They're being trained in some observational tools. And then we've shifted into having all of our consultants fan too. So we're in the process of doing that. And that comes out of the Fussy Baby Network at the Erickson Institute. So we're working with Linda Gilkerson to bring the fan to all of our consultants. So I preach into the choir here when it comes to thinking about, you know, what we do during our session. So I remember when I was training with Jill Hennis many years ago, she facilitated a consultation session where, you know, the home visitor was calling or knocking on the door and the family was not answering. And that was the check-in. That was the thing that the home visitor was most struggling with. And I thought, how is Jill gonna make and a half out of this conversation? But those of you who know Jill, right, know how gifted and talented she is around, you know, pulling out all of the wondering with this moment. And it was amazing to really think about what is the state of the mind, you know, of the consultant, the home visitor. And sure enough, we did process it the entire time. When I'm thinking about now too, and about the pandemic and how some can't even knock on the door, it's about a phone call, it's about like a video attempt happening, how much is happening for the family. I also think about what is the pandemic up for certain families too. What if they had a history of not having enough in their life and, you know, they hit that period of time where they're in toilet paper, you know, what kind of anxiety did that bring for them? if they've experienced some sort of trauma, if we all became very, very hypervigilant during this time. And so what did that bring up for that individual? When we also think about, is there a cultural match or a match in ethnicity between the home visitor and the family? What about their experience with helping agencies or power differential? You know, many of these things. And so I think it's our hope too, as we engage with home visitors, that we can slow down and consider how the work impacts, you know, the home visitor and how the work impacts the family. And even just establishing that initial relationship, you know, can be the hardest part of this work. So do people have just some thoughts or actions that you want to share during this time? I noticed some comments.
Oh, this is Ronelle from Way to Grow. And I know it's a question, you know, that we talk about with staff. And, you know, some have been expressing their frustration in a little bit deeper ways. So we were looking at doing an internal training just on, you know, thinking about the 10 things that families are dealing with on why they didn't answer the phone or why they didn't answer your text. And, you know, we've seen these trends over this last year on, you know, the main reasons why. Somebody's sick, they're working double shifts, their hours changed, you know, all these different reasons. But it really is trying to have staff think about, you know, this isn't about you. You know, you have goals to meet, but you need to think about from their perspective why they're not answering, send a postcard, do something a little different. So kind of reflect on what you could do different to connect with them in a time when they're rushing or struggling and can't talk to one more person. In the short version.
Definitely. Yeah, I think that's a really important topic too. And then I also see with some home visitors where they have just been hoping that we can get back to normal. Right. And when we get back to normal, then I can do the typical things that I do to establish a relationship. And darn it, this virus is sticking around for a while. And so sometimes it takes, you know, a moment on the part of the home visitor to kind of shift thinking in the brain and think about, how can I think about new ways of establishing or reinforcing relationships in, you know, utilizing the technology that I have, or the way of building relationship now. I mean, when you don't have that felt experience, right, of being in the same room with one another, I think our mirrored neurons work a little bit. Like, I know that because when I see babies on the screen, I feel like I get this like intense feeling of, you know, something is happening. The oxytocin is working, but it's hard, right? It's hard to get a read on a family and build that relationship over video or over phone too, or to have people let you in when they're feeling all sorts of other things. Other thoughts? Is this a theme you're seeing?
I was just going to say one of the biggest themes that we're seeing is just the holding of stress, not only for the home visitors holding family stress, but holding their own stress at the same time, and just feeling like their capacity to hold any more is really been worn away.
Definitely, I would agree. And then we're seeing people at home, right, juggling their own. I just had a consultation with a public health group this morning, and you know, one mom is talking about her case, and then you see her 3-year-old come and jump on her lap, and she has to pause for a second. And yeah, we're managing things that we didn't necessarily have to manage.
And I think too, just like you were saying, that in-home experience, that felt experience is so different. It's not the intensity of just staring at a screen. And I think sometimes we forget to remind, at least here, I, you know, have learned that it really is helpful for the home visitor to remind the mom or the provider, like, you can get up and move around. I've got a fidget ball. We don't have to be like staring at each other, because that intensity can be really, I mean, it's exhausting for all of us that, you know, do it frequently. And I just think of like how much more vulnerable the families that we're working with are in that arena. So just, you know, tell them to get them walk. I mean, if I were in the home, you know, they'd be walking around and, you know, kind of being able to find easy distractions to not make, to decrease that intensity a little bit. So I just think that we have to recognize that, maybe not have such great expectations around the length of the visit and the, you know, it's just, it's right now it's about connecting and engaging. So.
And Molly, you bring up such an important point too about what does eye contact mean for someone, you know, based on their culture, based on
that's
of potentially trauma, right? So like you were saying, that feeling of vulnerability and how intense that can make someone feel. So maybe if they were in person and, like you were saying, could be walking around and not gazing, there would be this positive feeling. But now, you know, I'm having a stress hormone release because now I have to look directly at my home visitor.
Which we all know then decreases our capacity to be able to even think outside the box and things like that.
Right.
So, yes.
I think, Molly, that's so important. I think that balance of the immediate work of trying to be effective at virtual visiting, and then that affects that staff development. They also at the same time want to be growing and getting better at their job. And I think they've been stuck and can't see the end in sight in that. And that has a real mental health. We have a lot of younger staff who signed up for this job because they wanted to grow as professionals and maybe move into management, things like that. But I think they feel like they're stuck right now, very similar to the way our families must feel stuck because they can't see the end in sight. And it isn't virtual work. You can get a little better at it, but it still doesn't move you forward. And without that energy, they don't even have things to talk about sometimes, or I really see a loss in that. Like, they were so engaging to work with for me as a supervisor because they were always trying to grow. And now it's like, now I feel like I'm just trying to keep them with us because I feel like some of them are saying, this isn't what I wanted to do. And this just keeps draining on. And maybe I want to do something else. And so I'm fearful of that because we've invested so much in their staff development and really hate to lose them. But the longer this drags out, the more it's taking its toll.
That is so right. I'm seeing that as well. Just people not feeling effective at their job, also not feeling effective as a parent at the same time too. You know, feeling like they're juggling and then not having those same moments. Those, I feel, trying to think of a term, but just those like pivotal moments, right? That are fulfilling in one's career development. Important part.
Yeah, I think that they're having Zoom fatigue. And I think any chance they have, this is what I'm seeing, any chance they have to go do a clinic to do immunizations, they'll do it just because they get that interaction and they just are missing it so much, or they will drop off something for a client just to have that slight interaction. I mean, we're looking at our protocols for the spring and how can we engage with families in person, maybe outside versus, you know, trying to get them some more engagement is really what they're thriving for. They really miss it. And they don't feel effective at this point.
Thank you. Atande, 2 more slides and we'll talk a little bit more. So really the goal for those who aren't receiving consultation or reflective consultation is just for them to become familiar with it and to create a customized phase 1 plan with a consultant. So we are thinking about 4 hours a month, and sites could use it in any way that they would like. So engage in some training. We would like them to experience the consultation, so they might engage in as a group, maybe meeting too with someone who's in charge of things like the supervisor or director, and just starting to build a relationship, really thinking about what are the joys and challenges associated with that site. And when I was thinking about our trained clinicians, I will say the majority of them are white women. We are making a really concerted effort to bring as many clinicians or consultants of color or who identify with culturally specific groups on. And so I'm really happy to say these are people I've had connections with over my career. We have one woman named Adelida, and she is meeting with sites that want to have a Latina consultant. We have another woman named Jihan, who serves individuals, all of our families, but also wanted to be able to reach Somali families. We're working on recruiting someone who identifies as Hmong, and then we have 2 individuals who identify as American Indian, one who's still in training and comes with another consultant to help support her in her journey, and then another gentleman who's starting with us right now. And we've invited them to be part of affinity groups too, to make sure that individuals who are doing this work and representing really important communities can be supported in ways that feel helpful to them, especially when thinking about equity, diversity, and inclusion and belonging. So I wanted to say our hope too, if you guys have home visiting sites that are serving culturally specific populations, that we could connect them with a consultant who they feel could match or they would have some congruence with in that way. And so if the service feels helpful, creating a phase 2 plan for continued early childhood mental health consultation. Again, you guys all have, lovely and competent people who are working with many of your agencies. And so that's not what we're focused on here. We're hoping to work with agencies who aren't receiving, services. And I think, it was alluded to in the beginning, our system just comes in as a package, right? So people are receiving their supervision from supervisors, and then our supervisors seek consultation with Khadijah Johnston, who's a national trainer, and some help from Linda Gilkerson as well. And so I think that was our thought, is it would take maybe the hard challenges out of finding someone and then engaging in the contracting process to just access some of our consultants through the system. Oh, and then I just put, if you are all probably familiar with this, but if not, you are free to access this site, and it will talk about IECMH consultation and home visiting. So for those not present, I thought they could take a look at this site. I can't, Laura, can you just, do you want to say what you're thinking? I can see only part of your.
Oh, sure. Sorry. Thank you for this great information from both you and Julie and Dawn, or not both, but the 3 of you. Just a quick question for you. One of the things that we've heard from a couple sites now, or a couple home visiting sites, is that the bond between the individual providing the consultation services and the staff just didn't happen. And rather than trying to be honest rather than having the conversation that this relationship isn't working, some of these organizations just chose not to pursue the consultation services. And in some instances, we've heard it was culturally based, and then others it was not. But I'm wondering if you could speak to, as we think about building capacity in this area, can you speak to the process of how organizations can get their needs met and not worry about making other people mad? It's kind of a
Right.
Minnesota problem, right?
It is. It is. And we've had it happen very rarely. We do feel like when individuals develop a relationship and our consultants are also receiving reflective consultation over time, that, you know, we have pretty good success. But there have been a couple of instances. We had something happen the other day where we didn't have you know, the consultant who identifies as Latinx on our crew. And we assigned a childcare site that predominantly spoke Spanish with a consultant who did not speak Spanish. And we used an interpreter, and they, you know, appeared to have a lovely relationship. And then when Adelinda started consultation with family, friend, and neighbor groups, she connected with a director at that and said, oh, I didn't realize you worked for the same group. And there are some topics associated with racism that our staff haven't felt comfortable bringing forth to this individual. And so what we've done is we've put everyone together, right? And had them think about, is there still a role for the consultant that they have? And I think they've decided, yes, there is. And then also, is there a role that Adelinda can play as well? And so I've had another agency to give me a call and say, you know, I could use someone maybe actually who had a different schedule, different availability. And so we talked about being able to find another site. And then sometimes if it's just you know, maybe it is about rupture and repair and something that we need to help this site and this consultant navigate through some reflective consultation as well. That's what we do. So it, again, happens very rarely, but if it does, I do feel like we have a process for thinking together with everyone about how to help it feel effective.
Thank you. I think that's, as we explore this pilot, I just think it's going to be important for us, especially as we onboard some of the nonprofits who haven't had this relationship with the state agencies in this way. And as we think about the capacity building dollars, there's a real power dynamic just because of the way in which organizations operate that I just hope we can pay attention to, and it's and thinking about strategies to encourage that kind of feedback and just maybe some regular check-ins. Unfortunately, again, I'll just say in Minnesota, we're not so very good at raising issues that might seem combative or that might make us uncomfortable. Those difficult conversations or critical conversations are not so easy for a lot of people across the state. And I'm just thinking out loud about the possibility of making it easier and having a number of strategies in place. So,
you know, and this is Dawn. Can you guys hear me? Okay, good. Hi, everyone. Sorry, I'm late. I think, so I'm from Minnesota Department of Health. If there are some people on the group that don't know me, it looks like you have good attendance. One of the things that I think is important to keep in mind is the way the state funding work and how we've always done our federal funding from MDH and home visiting is the money is typically given to the agencies. So the agencies have the, you know, power to say, I mean, granted, we approve it. So, but they, you know, can say, this is what our plan should be. And we've seen a whole continuum of plans. We've seen people invest in their own staff and say, I'm going to send our supervisors or a lead home visitor to these trainings to get them up on reflective consultation. Now, obviously, infant mental health consultation is a whole other certificate process, but they certainly could choose to use that money to build internal capacity. They can be good consumers about what consultation, they, when they want to contract out, what they want to contract out for. And that is how our funding is designed to work. The 93% of the funding has to go out to direct services. So we're doing this part right now in phase one. One, because we know there's a need. Two, I have no staff. So it's sort of like, what can we do? Right now I have a lot of money because I've had no staff, so I've been able to pay salaries. So it's sort of filling this gap, because I think it's hard to be a good consumer when you don't know what you should be ordering on the menu, right? So I think this phase one step is kind of leveling the playing field, making sure everyone understands. I just want to be sure that everyone understands our phase two from MDH's perspective is to figure out how can we move forward. And my guess is it's a bunch of different paths. It's probably where are there expertise, infant mental health consultants, what other things that we need to bring in, and how can the state facilitate that? So it's not every individual agency going out on their own and trying to figure it out. Where is the capacity building that we need to do at the local agency level? And then, B, C, D, E that I haven't thought of or mentioned. So I just want to be clear about that. But I do think this is part of agencies being good consumers. The funding we give to you, we want you to be thinking of like, what can you do with it? What can you brainstorm? What are the things we're not thinking of? And I think we saw, one, I don't know that all state agencies, much less MDH, have always been good about approaching things that way. And the other part is, I think in particular, we saw with nonprofits, you guys have lived in a world of, if I'm the cheapest service, I might get funded. And that's not how our funding has to operate. And so I think we need to do some better communication to say, no, think about what you need and let's ask for it, because the funding is there. We just need to get it out and think of what to do. So.
And I know we had some questions in the beginning too that were in the PowerPoint, and I just wanted to know from you all your thoughts on those. And I know there's a time cap. I know I said I had to zip out for a reflective session with some childcare folks, and they actually said, I know you still have a schedule, but they said we need to reschedule. So just 5 minutes before this meeting. So I'm not as pressed for time.
I did put the questions in the chat, everybody. So if you're able to access that, then some thoughts would be great.
Right. So in addition to kind of this agency specific consultation that we can provide, infant and early childhood mental health consultation, we could think about some larger webinars or trainings. And we have Michelle Fallon, who I think many of you know, who's associated with our system, and she has agreed to help in preparing things if we need it done quickly. So that's wonderful. And yeah, so I guess, are there specific topics? And thinking about, how to get some of these folks who maybe aren't at the table, or some of you who are at the table today, how would you like to be engaged or partnered with to think about trying this out?
Taya, my big question is, what are the people that aren't at this table? What are they needing? I mean, so I just wonder if we could somehow look at those, start with those agencies that are receiving funding and figure out how to do a focus group. I mean, if you don't, most of the people here have it or are at least familiar with what reflective consultation is, but if, like Dawn said, if you don't know what it is, it's hard to know how to even go forward. So how do we get those that aren't represented here? How do we engage with them to get them what we know can be so beneficial? So, and maybe they have ideas of how to make this work in a maybe a little bit different approach or a different venue that still falls within reflective capacity, but I mean, it takes a long time to build relationships.
It does. It does. And one of my thoughts had been, and I know, see, I have to remember because I haven't represented the state for many years in my life. Like I'm just a home visitor and therapist, right? And so I am happy to reach out and have, create relationships with people and have just an open discussion about how might this feel and what type of consultant would meet, the needs too of your agency so that I can make a good match. But I also know when my phone number says state of Minnesota or my email address that I might appear scary. So I don't know if you all have also relationships with some of these sites and wouldn't mind doing some sort of warm handoff or introduction. That would be appreciated.
Yeah, I'm wondering, and I'm sorry if you've told me this already, but I'm wondering if you have a kind of a one-page document that we can make available to the 10 nonprofits. It's 10, right, Don? 10 nonprofits who did not include it in their current grants to introduce it, because I think it'll be useful for us to have some shared language to talk about what this means. I think at first it might feel like, oh my God, you want one more thing out of me? And if you're not used to that and maybe don't even have the experience of benefiting from the consultation, right? So it does allow us to be more vulnerable. But it's a different way of operating. And if you're not used to working in that way, it might be really helpful to have something that we can share with staff to help prep them inside the organizations. And then I'm also wondering if there are a few people who currently use this that we might be able to use some testimonials, right? Like, how are you using it in your organization? Whether you're, regardless of the kind of program you're using it, but maybe the benefits to you and your teams would be really helpful testimonials that we can share with people.
I think that is, yeah, getting the list, having some outreach from those of us that maybe are nonprofits or that have kind of can hold the both hand of, I know this is scary and hard, and yet this is some of the benefits, and even having, some testimonials like prepared so that we're ready. So, or what's holding them back from having it too, kind of finding out what's getting in the way.
We don't use it at Simpson Housing, but I would like to hear from people here even what do you consider the benefits? How do you do you choose your consultant? For us, it would be, I would want someone who was very culturally specific because of the participants that we hold. If someone could share that with me, I'd appreciate that.
Well, I can speak to what we have in Ramsey County. We have 7 teams. So I have 7 teams in family home visiting. And some are family wellness, NFP, HFA, and now we have PAT, and we have a community outreach team, which comprises of PAT as well. And just to give you this year has been one that has really brought this out about, after the George Floyd murder, people were in a spot where they needed, our staff were in a spot that they needed to talk about this, and having the right person in that room and space, in that trusted space to understand what they're going through, no matter what their race and ethnicity is. But that was an important, and it highlighted what we needed going forward. It highlighted that we have different groups that need specific a specific person to help them through. And so we are actually going through the RFP process right now. And in there, we've highlighted what we need for each group. And we won't have one we've had Jill for a long time and been grateful for that, but we will have, and Jill's retiring. I don't know if everyone knows that, but she'll be retiring in April. We're going to have different groups for different or different people for different groups so that they get their needs met culturally and it represents their community they're serving. So that's really important to us, and we have a diverse population, and we want to meet the needs of our families and community. So we've learned from this year, and it was before this year anyway, before the George Floyd murder. We've been talking about it before then, how we want to maybe change up things. We've had the opportunity to have van training in our department, and we're actually looking at the Erickson Institute to provide some consultation with us. So that's exciting. I don't know if, and I'd be happy to talk to you, Nidra. Tamiko Ralston is our PAT supervisor and does a lot with the African-American community as a whole. And she's really seeking to have someone through that community to help her and her group meet the needs of their staff. So, but would be happy to talk more. But we're excited about this new RFP and having more diversity in the future.
Thank you.
Yeah, and just real quick, it's really carving out the time. I mean, it seems like there's like, where are you going to put in consultation time? I mean, it's required, you know, of the grants, yes, definitely to do it one-on-one, but the consults we've been having currently for the last year are with a mental health professional out of the Duluth area. And so we divided into teams. And so it just took this time to say, okay, for 2 hours every month, we're going to do this. And we all had to identify in the meeting that, okay, I need to be typing this while I'm talking and sitting here for 2 hours. And the first part was really just clearing the mind of all that stuff and saying, okay, I'm going to be here and I'm going to be present and I'm going to get into the reflective questions. And the first few months for staff, this is for home visitors and managers and our preschool team. The first few sessions were what they call just dumping, just what's on your mind, get out everything. And then it was building on, what do you do with this with the families? What do you do with this for yourself? How do you lay in different behavioral practices? But it was really carving out the time and making it happen and making it a priority. And that was probably the trickiest part. And then getting into it and then what you do with it. So it's very beneficial. It's been very beneficial. And like I said, staff have appreciated that time as well. So.
I really echo what Renelle just shared. It's a learned process. Staff don't always understand when we first start what it's supposed to be. So you need a really good, consultant to teach them. And then also we moved to small groups. There are actually 5 in a group, and that was because of the time factor. We just couldn't fit it in, and that's been pretty effective. They have to learn to interact with each other too, and sometimes there'll be some complaints about dominating and things like that, but they need to learn to interact in that way too, because of the time constraints. So be open to that too. It works.
I love that story, Renelle. That's when you know it's successful, right? When it turns from a I have to I want to come, right? That's awesome.
Mm-hmm. I think when I began reflective practice and brought my team into it many years ago, there was this sense that, like you said, you couldn't give up. You wanted to type an email while you're doing it. You just have to surrender to this time. I mean, it was like a surrendering of, okay, I'm going to commit this and be in the moment. And if you're not in that moment and able to participate, you're not getting anything out of it. So it's really important to help your team get to that point. It just takes some time because it's such a time commitment.
I think it's so parallel to the work the home visitors are doing, right? When they first go in, the parents don't really know how to use them and they don't know if they want to do it. And what are you going to do for me? How are you going to help me? How can I use you? All of those things that we know that happen in that relationship with our home visitors and the families. It's very parallel.
That's what I was just going to say.
That consultant relationship.
Right. yeah, constantly thinking about the parallel process and in how do I engage? How do I do love your story too, Renelle, because it's like, I want to be here, but I also want to have just enough to be able to be like, I might share it at some point. And I do think everybody's on their own journey with that. And the consultant, if they're doing their job in a way that is effective, they're okay with that. And they're willing to lean into that and let it be a part of the data that you can work like that tells us about the person in ways that, and then you can use that later to be like, I remember when, or I just think, Nidra, I think it's hard to describe like what's the point other than it is about building a place for the home visitor to not feel so alone, but that somebody's out there thinking about this stuff with them. And it's really about, the line is helping the home visitor think about what they're feeling and feel about what they're thinking. So, we all go into these things and we have all the, I was a home visitor myself, and all this stuff when you're in the home is just kind of really all coming at you, and you have to think pretty quickly about what's my next step. And it's about slowing down that process. A lot of times, I do the individual consultation for our staff here. It's just taking 10-minute snippets and say, let's just break that open, right? And talk about what do you think that was like for the parent? What do you think that's like for the kid? What do you think it's like, what was it like for you? And what are some of the things that came up, and it's usually about kind of tough situations so that they have a place to just unpack it without judgment. I don't know. So, but it takes time to build that relationship. So,
and I was going to add, sometimes it's helpful. I mean, and that's what's nice about this funding, the flexibility there. If like you as a leader want to just experience what it feels like, right? And then decide, does this feel right for my staff? Right? Does this particular person that we're meeting feel like they're a good match for our staff? And that's certainly, like an important thing to do, right? Is to build that relationship and then be able to say with confidence, right? This is what your staff may need.
This is Dawn. I'm gonna step in with the boring logistics, not this rich discussion, but just, I know people were sort of like, well, okay, well, what's the next step? How do we let people know about it? So obviously we have everyone's grant agreement. So I just need to quick go through. I have some sense of who, I just need to look at budgets and see who put it in. And to be honest, we might even just, maybe a fast way would be for me to grab all of our nonprofits. Taya did have a kind of a one-page flyer to send that out to them. And, it would come probably from me and just say, we have this opportunity. It's kind of this time limited. How would you like to be contacted? Can we have Taya contact you directly? Do you want to contact her? What do you want? And then I think it would be great if in that email I could say, if you've had questions about this before or want to hear from some of your peers, we do know that there are some that have it, and we can connect you, either through who we know or who the target home visiting knows. If before you engage, with DHS, you want to just talk to someone. So that might be great, Laura, if whether it's Molly or Renelle or Ramsey or so that might be a thing as well. It's the timing is challenging. The good news is the lawyers have all agreed. So that was like the biggest deal. So we just, Catherine and Wright and I were, and Taya saw that last night, finally. MDH lawyers agreed on Monday and DHS lawyers agreed yesterday afternoon. So it looks like this contract will go forward. Right. I know, which really should just top off our 2021.
Yeah, so. Yeah. And the only challenge on our part is I need to identify the consultants we're thinking about. So I didn't name all of our culturally specific clinicians, all of the different regions that we serve. But if someone is interested, that was kind of a first step for me, as I'm trying to figure out how many we need. And then also like what people would want in a particular consultant, and then I will reach out to our consultants. Many of them have already, they just know in general that there's a home visiting project that they could be involved with, and many of them have already said, please sign me up, but I just need to know so that we can alter some of their contracts and they can do this work.
Taya, I do want to still ask that question of, say someone does
Yeah.
want to be trained as a consultant, then what are those
Right.
qualifications or the training required?
Right. So most of our consultants right now are part of our early childhood mental health grant. So they're grantees from all over the state. And then we have kind of a growing handful of people who contract through MACMA. Right now, we are looking to recruit not very many people, but people who are serving culturally specific groups. So that's where we're recruiting right now. And they would have to be a licensed mental health professional with experience in infant and early childhood mental health. Some of the individuals that we've been recruiting lately maybe don't have some formalized training, but that's part of what we can help them get, is to maybe develop or hone in skills in certain areas that maybe they haven't had the opportunity to get. And so we've been supporting individuals in doing that and supporting them also through the endorsement system.
Are you able to send me information about that? What, like who you're recruiting for and things like that?
Yeah, it's not a formal process, Atunde. So it's, people are just usually saying, hey, I know of someone, and then they send them my way, and then I talk with them about what we're looking for, because it's such a small population of clinicians right now, like super small. There are not too many clinicians trained in infant and early childhood mental health, but I would love to talk though a little bit more, and maybe it is something that we could create together, is something that describes the process a little better.
Taya, there's two questions floating. One,
Yeah.
Kathy's asking about whether or not you ever work with Seed Reflective Practice Center at the U of M. And then this might be a question actually more for Dawn, but possibly related to what Laura is asking too, around the constraints of the funding and only being able to share this resource with like either I think it's grantees, actual grantees of the program, and what kind of future flexibilities might you see with that in order to be able to expand that service potentially to other programs that aren't necessarily grantees, but still doing home visiting.
And just to speak quickly to the Seed Reflective Practice Center, some of us individually have relationships, but as a state system, we're not partnered with that particular system. But certainly, there's mutual respect too, and there have been some moments where we've attempted to, provide something together, like a shared training. So.
I know there was, I want to say maybe 5 years, 6 years ago, the SEED program offered, I think it was scholarships or to county. I think there were some counties involved in this because we had some people go and take that course for free. I don't know what that was. I could find out about it, but it was a great opportunity actually for some people to get trained in infant mental health.
Yep, and Seed has it's a little shorter program, and then the Center for Human Development has the 2-year program. I'm actually involved as an instructor for one of the courses there, and that's a 2-year program.
So let me just clarify a couple of questions I see in the chat. Well, one, Kathy, I have no idea, right, if it was over 5 years ago, that's kind of before my time, but that could have been, we had a competitive funding from MCTHV, and I think I know they increased, access to infant mental health. So I don't know if that was part of that or if it was completely separate, but this contract, this quick contract we're doing, interagency agreement we're doing with DHS includes funding for our current evidence base, and it also includes 20 hours of consultation for people who we don't work with at all. You know, we just had to pick a figure to go forward. So that is included. So yes, we would definitely be relying on the Target Home Visiting Coalition to help us identify who that is, because we don't work with them. They're not one of our grantees. I think going forward, so when, again, we talked about like phase 2, phase 3, you know, what do we do? There's a couple things in motion. One, I think as long as it's capacity building, you know, like what our restrictions are, we can look at like, okay, how, you know, we can do capacity building, we can do training. Obviously, if we plan a large training and there's open seats, we're not going to turn people away. The intent we move forward might be like, oh, we're going to address this with our grantees and how do other people benefit. The other thing is, as probably many of you know, the reason Laura and I were not at the beginning of the meeting is there's a bill to increase the flexibility of how the current home visiting evidence-based funds are used, and that would open up some additional opportunities for us. So one, there is some stuff we can do with our current funding, the way it's structured. We just sometimes are a little more limited in how much, but I think we'll wait till see what happens by March 25th or whenever the end of the session is, and we'll know what other opportunities we might have. So I don't know if that's clear as mud now.
Yeah, I wanted to add too, there's a bunch of funding from the preschool development grant that's happening right now. And they're looking to put together some groups, some learning collaboratives about trauma and healing. And so they've also asked us to provide mental health consultation. So I think we're doing, potentially, it could be about 30 different groups throughout the state. And it will be some individuals involved in education. But Laura, I think people have heard too, that if we can find home visitors that aren't, you know, that are serving the early childhood population and aren't receiving consultation in other ways, there may be a possibility, right? If there's enough room in those particular groups to add folks. So.
Yeah, if we could get, when you have information on those trainings, it would be great if we could help promote that. And then we'll do some targeted outreach to respond to both of your, questions or opportunity. Like we want to take advantage of those 20 hours for the non-funded programs too, because I just think there's so many people who come into somebody's home in varying lengths, right? So some of them are really short-term home visits, and then some are longer-term, more evidence-informed opportunities that we would really love to engage. And then even, I know we're going to wrap this up here, but even thinking forward around some of the justice involved parents, and how could we utilize some of the reflective practice for home visitors who are, or sometimes they're doulas, right, through the Minnesota Doula Prison Project, but they are coming in and doing a quasi home visit. So they're doing the parent education. And so it's, anyway, so there are lots of opportunities for us to grow and make this available. I think it's just a really helpful tool and strategy to keep people who are working with families healthier. and it's like part of the continuous improvement efforts that we all want to be moving forward with. So, and
Taya can speak more to the PDG preschool development grant, but I do think in a way the flow will work out kind of well, because obviously ours is, the lawyers approved ours now, and we'll get going, and Taya will, now she has to do a couple contracts, but we'll be over the next 3 months through June. And what I've heard more on MDH's end is the preschool development grant is getting all their contracts and everything in place, and probably would start more like end of June, July. So just know that the communications efforts we're doing as we keep you know, the worst thing you worry is you raise interest and then you're like, oh, sorry, that's over. But it won't be, right? We'll sort of go on to the next round.
Yeah, and preschool development grant, they have secured funding to December 2022. So it'll be a long relationship, at least longer than many can be. So, and again, I am just, if anyone wants to email, I would be happy to, you know, create a time to, you know, video chat with you if you can stand any more video chat, or, you know, have a phone conversation, because I know I didn't answer, you know, everyone's questions, or maybe we just weren't able to connect kind of more individually, but happy to do that. So.
Thank you to the both of you, Dawn and Taya. And I'm actually just going to pass it back to Molly, who came off mute. So we have about 10 minutes left. We have to breeze through our business updates. Please do not leave. We got a lot going on still that we want to make sure we mention. So I'm just curious about, Laura, if you have thoughts on what you want to prioritize as well before, just with those last 9 minutes now.
Which we carved out 30 minutes for. So,
Well, I do actually wonder if, Don, if this might be a way for you to say you haven't had as much time to dive into it. The MCTHV funding. So I do want to just do a high level kind of what are some policy efforts going forward at the federal level and at the state level, because we really need people to be talking to their legislators. And I really want to make sure we're sharing about the MCTHV funding and flexibility, but we could come back to this, Dawn. I mean,
I think we should not have you waste your time on my ill preparation.
Okay.
so non-intentional, but just, yeah,
right.
I haven't had time to look at it, but there are changes and some flexibility. And I think our main question is, we get funding every year from MCTHV and they overlap. And so it's just, when would we apply for it for this next round that's coming up? We'll probably get the release, you know, it's all behind the scenes. You guys wouldn't know that, our grantees wouldn't know about it. Would we try and make an adjustment to the current funding we have? So I need to take a look at it and see. And then, as you know, there's current proposals to get increased MCTHV funding.
Right.
So I'm sorry, I just haven't,
nope,
I kept telling Laura, I was like, I haven't had time to look at it.
So maybe what we could do then is, if it's all right with you, we can breeze through just we'll just go really high level policy updates so that we can hit up the business meeting as well in the last few minutes. So
we're not going to be able to do all of that. I'll just tell you that right now. It's not going to be possible. But if you want to focus on the policy stuff, then we can also find another way to communicate the rest of the items too.
Okay. Well, I'll try to do 3
I was going to suggest that too, Atande, and maybe it's pretty well detailed in the agenda, in the notes. So if we can do the policy stuff and then kind of just have people read through the notes in the business part of the section. But
it's actually well detailed in your notes, but not everybody else's. So sorry, you're looking at the internal agenda, Molly. Okay, I'll go really quick, and then please jump in because I can't see everybody in this screen right now if you have a question. I did just want to let people know that the budget reconciliation, the ARP, the American Rescue Plan that's moving through Congress right now for $1.9 trillion does have a number of pieces that we're watching on behalf of home visiting and the families that you serve. So currently, as Don mentioned, there is $150 million in the House bill for MCTHV. So this is expanded funding, and it supports the policy flexibility that was passed in December. And so we will, Don, have you back, and maybe we'll have like a special interview where we can post the results and send it out to people about what that means for Minnesota. We have signed on to that bill in the past, or signed on for support, and we will continue to try to see about moving that forward. Also in this bill, which is consistent with our state policy, there is a policy language that would allow postpartum coverage through medical assistance to 12 months without CMS approval. And there's also some FMAP rate, like it's a little bit, I think it increases it to 5%. I'll just add, like right now in the state, what's happening with this is the bill is going through the committee process. We just got the first fiscal note. It looks like it's about 4,000 families that would be served after those, like from 60 days to a year. And the fiscal note was 9 million in the first biennium and then 29 million ongoing. So we don't need CMS approval to do this if this passes through reconciliation, but there will be some state costs. The good, and then I will move on. There's $1 billion in there for Head Start and early Head Start expansion. So Shanna, at some point it would be great if we could share more details about what that might mean for Minnesota. And then we see increases in WIC and SNAP funding. So that's helpful for the families that we work with around food insecurity. And then there's resources for mental health, social and emotional development, and early education. So there are a number of resources in there. And Atanda, you can move forward to the next slide. I will say, one of the things that I've been in discussion with Atande and other people who are working on this is, you know, most of the funding that goes to support families is run through systems. And while there are some direct funding going to families, it's very limited in what we give families. So there might be the credit to families, there's some tax credits, but really truly government expects families to receive the supports they need through systems and services. And my hope is if we actually do see this pass, which is very likely because we just need a simple majority, that we're really cognizant about how we can make resources and services available to families in the most flexible way, because they're still having to jump through hoops that aren't always helpful to them. So that's my own little soapbox. State policy update. State budget has improved. We have about a $641 million surplus in this current biennium that ends June 30th. We're looking at a $1.6 billion surplus for the next biennium. That's huge improvement because in November, the forecast was indicating $1.2 billion deficit. So we've made some really good progress. And really what that means to me, or what that tells me, is that that divide between those that have and those that don't is just growing. I mean, we see this as need increases for different programming. People who have resources are just fine. They're continuing, their investments are growing. And then families that don't have the ability to save or have these investments are just falling further and further behind. So this divide in those that have and those that don't is, this pandemic is just really exacerbating that. The family home visiting, we had 2 bills up this morning. I'm excited to report, and thank you, Nidra and Joel, for testifying, and thank you, Kathy, for having your home visitor and health educator, Lasharian, testify. So our home visiting bill was passed onto the Health Finance and Policy Division. And then the big $278 million bill request for additional funding was laid over for consideration. It really will depend on what the budget targets look like, whether or not we see any additional money going into home visiting, although I am very hopeful that we won't see any cuts to home visiting at all, including the recommended cuts to nurse family partnership. Telehealth is moving forward. We are tracking that, still looking for an opportunity to insert the family home visiting portions of the policy. It is not in either bill yet. but we are working on that. I already talked about the MA coverage. We're in a really good spot. There's a ton of organizations who are interested in supporting this. The Healthy Start Act and paid family medical leave are two bills that are moving forward that impact the families that we serve through home visiting. And I just wanted to make sure we quickly touched on those because our legislative committee and executive committee expressed support for these. So we will be tracking these and reporting on these. The Healthy Start Act allows for women who are in prison, this doesn't impact the jail population, but for women who are in prison at Shakopee, if you are pregnant or in that first year postpartum, you this bill would allow women to move into community alternative settings so that they could birth and have that first year with their child. This is part of that model policies that we've been talking about through the coalition over time. So the bill has its first hearing this Friday in the Public Safety and Criminal Reform Committee in the House. So we submitted a letter of support for that. Happy to share more later if you'd like to learn more. And then paid family and medical leave is moving through the House, and we're working to try to help get a hearing in the Senate. This is a very popular program. It's an insurance program. However, it's unclear whether or not the Senate will give it a hearing. But honestly, it will help many of our families as they give birth and spend that initial time bonding with their children. So that's very, very quick. I want to give us time for questions. I would say, oh, Brunel, it looks like you were talking, but I couldn't hear you. Oh, no? Okay.
All right, I have a quick question. If there's one thing you would want us to talk to our legislators about right now, what would it be on your list? Maybe you can have three, but just curious.
Specifically,
Yeah.
Nancy, I would love for you to
No,
find
no,
out.
for everyone on the call, like, like home visiting.
Yeah. We need you to actually check in with Representative Franson. She voted no on the home visiting bill. I have no idea why. Only 2 legislators.
Okay.
So find out why, please. And
Okay.
copy me. It's absurd. But anyway, so what we really do need is people to be talking about home visiting, getting ready for the Senate hearing. So reaching out to your senators will be really helpful. They haven't heard this bill for a couple years. Unlike the House. So the House has been on this. I just think that more stories we can share about the benefits to families in your community will be really, really helpful. LaSharian was a star today. She did a phenomenal job talking about how home visiting and her home visitors, like all this reflective practice talk we just said, it just like she exuded her excitement and her appreciation for the home visiting so much that that's what she decided to do with her life, and how because of home visiting she was able to move out of poverty and have a full-time job and be the parent she wants to be. I mean, it was beautiful. So much love by legislators. Ooh, all right, Thierry. It was really powerful to hear that personal story. So I was grateful to have that. And the more stories we can share, like LaSharian's, because that's what you all do, the easier it is to make the case. So
I agree. I could show you my Kleenex that
I know.
I went and got it. I was like, oh my gosh.
I just teared up again. Sorry.
Yeah, no, it was very moving. Yeah, it was very moving. And she was so positive. It was just, yeah, it was like everything you want to show about home visiting and the determination of the parents who stay with it, right?
Yeah.
Have we ever offered a bit of a script for people to send to their centers? I think people get really intimidated. I'm wondering if we could have something and then people could add their own personal story to it, but really like some bullet points around the message. I know for my folks, when they have something like that, they're much more willing to reach out. It's a starting point for them for what to say to their senators or what to write in a message. that would be awesome.
Sure,
Thank you.
you bet. So,
And I don't think this happens in this group so much, but I will say, so at MDH, we constantly are like, share stories, share stories. And one of the things we've seen, maybe to be honest, more from our counties when they share, is they make the home visitor the hero of the story. And we're like, the parent is the hero of the story, right? And that doesn't mean we don't love our home visitors, right? We love our home visitors, but the parent is always the hero of the story, or heroine, as the case may be. So that's just what we've seen repeatedly. Sometimes they'll be like, this family was in a terrible place, and da 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 da, and then the home visitor came in, and we're like, no. It's a journey. You're walking with them, right? Which we know our home visitors say, but I think that would be a good thing to stress.
To put in the messaging, because I don't know that we know that they're going to say that, right? Like, what is the takeaway that we want these legislators, and then go back from there. So we want the legislators to hear that families are making a commitment to this process and the change that happens within the context of that work. So, and then how does that, talking points that reflect that. So, because I do think sometimes if we don't know what the message is or the intent of the message. So Dawn, I do appreciate you saying that, because I think it does get messy and blurred. And if people don't know exactly what it is, because they do know, that's why they're doing the work. But sometimes I think we, myself included, get a little intimidated, and it's like, how do I, what is the key points? So.
And I think some of it comes from almost wanting to protect the anonymity of families. And we're not asking you to out someone, but I think it all comes from a good place.
Yeah.
It just, we've seen it repeatedly where we're like, we can't use any of these stories, or we have to edit them so heavily to make it focus on the family.
I thought Nidra and Joel did a really nice job also kind of highlighting families within their testimony. So I might come back and circle back to share some of their testimony, if that's all right with the two of you to share some of what you've written. If you're not, I'll be able to share it. Okay. You just really very respectfully worded it. So yeah,
well, I'm going to jump in, and I know that we've had a really great discussion, but we also are 7 minutes past time. Yep. So just want to thank everyone for sticking with us. We'll share some follow-up when we are able to send out the recording of Don and Tea's presentation. Then we'll also send some of those other updates, because there's much that we weren't able to get to. But we will be in touch with those various opportunities related to infant mental health consultation, and some of the testimony pieces and the other things we discussed. So please keep your eye out and just stay engaged. And we appreciate having today with you all and being able to see everybody. And everyone stay on camera. That was so exciting. So thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great rest of your day.